Hey, Joe, I'm doing great. Good to see you.
There you are. You got better looking since the last time we talked. I don't know how you did that, but I will look for the secret on a late night TV series commercial. So Don, can you give us a little bit of your background, and then I want to ask about how your mind is today.
Sure. Entrepreneur by DNA, if you will. And I've owned several companies, sold several companies. And at the current moment, I'm the vice president for ASAP Drug Solutions here in the Gulf Coast region, where we perform background checks and drug testing programs for large organizations.
Wonderful. And what's it like going from entrepreneur to working for someone? Is that difficult?
Yeah, just a little bit. Definitely a mind shift.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But you're a servant leader. I know that about you. You're someone who believes in the cause that you work for.
I definitely try. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yep.
So my question I ask all my clients at the beginning of every conversation is, how is your mind today? And I know I've never asked you that because you've never been a client. We're just friends. But how is your mind today?
Like you've never asked that question before. I've never been asked that question before. So
It's a tough question. Can I tell you why?
Sure.
I watched a Disney movie about golf, and I guess there's a dog leg on golf courses where sometimes there's some trees and you got a chance to shoot down the fairway, or you can shoot over the trees into the right blind turn and end up closer to the hole and save one shot. In other words, you skip the turn, basically. So I was working with a pro golfer one day. He's been a client now for quite a while. And I said, how's your mind today? And he says, what do you mean? No one's ever asked me that. I said, well, you're a physical guy, so you know your physicality. Are there days you know you can take the shot over the trees? Not just from a strategy standpoint, like I need to save a shot, or I can gamble right now, but literally, you know that your mind-body coordination is so good and that you're strong enough. And this is a great day to take that shot. And so when I say, how's your mind today? I assess my mind every day when I wake up in the morning. Joyful, peaceful, grateful, relaxed, strong, creative, preoccupied, possibly conflicted, a little COVID crazy, as some of us have felt, fully and empathically in the moment, which is actually the goal, to be fully and empathically in the moment all the time. So how is your mind today, Don?
You know, I'm much closer to that full direction, knowing exactly where I'm going. If you'd have asked me that a week ago, it would have been a little bit different. But as they say, the stars have aligned a little bit and had some success and some focus in getting back down to the pathway that I know I'm supposed to be on. So I would tell you today it's pretty good.
That's wonderful. That's good to hear. Can I ask you, it's good for all of us to know as we listen to you. So I want to ask you a couple questions about leadership too. People don't know this, but there's nothing planned or staged here. You and I have not. I mean, I'm asking you stuff and you don't even know I'm asking you. I think that's the best way to do it. I've recognized my role as a leader recently. So I'm a person and I care about who I am as a person first and foremost. And I know that's who you are. I know that's how you operate. I've talked to you enough to know that you won't compromise that ever. But we're also a persona. We're a husband or a partner or a father or a friend or a lover or a leader. So if we take that down to a leader, how do you get up in the morning and say, okay, I'm Don. On this, we enter each age of life as a novice, physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically. How do we then say, okay, but I'm also a leader today, and I have to be this person today? How do you get your head around that before you go out into the world?
Yeah, that's probably one of the harder things for me to do, actually. It's very easy for me to be task oriented and people oriented from relationships or sitting down to do a task, but understanding that leadership role sometimes, especially if things are not always joyful or copacetic. There's critical paths or difficult decisions. I've been, they talk about flight or fight mentalities, right? Depending on the circumstances, I can be either or. I'm not necessarily one, but when it comes to difficult conversations, difficult decisions, I tend to be someone who tries to put myself outside of those things. They're more difficult for me to have, even like you mentioned, all the other roles as a husband, as a father. Those things are difficult for me, even though I have an authoritative aspect to whatever role that is. That goes against my natural grain. I was a police officer, in another life, if you will. And even sometimes those circumstances, and maybe that's why I'm not that person anymore either, because most of the time in those realms, you don't necessarily meet people at their best in that role. And in leadership, it's the same way. Whether you have difficult decisions, you've got an employee or a coworker that you have to address. Those things for me are much harder to wrap my head around. I guess maybe it works great for others who are naturally gifted at that, if that's such a thing, but it's not me. That's a harder thing for me to embrace if I know that's going to be part of my day.
I've found you to be a humble man. So while you've had authority as a police officer, an investigator, and so on, you live in a world of authority, if you will, rules and roles. Your humility is admirable to me. Your son, for example, and just the way that you have understood that you can't know it all, but you do have to have rules and regulations and so on. But others teach you about yourself. That's what I've learned about you. That you learn how to learn about yourself from others. That's a pretty impressive thing for somebody who's brought up with such a authoritative background. I mean, even the job you're in right now is authoritative, if you think about it. Sure, security. Uh, are you comfortable talking about your son?
Sure. Yeah.
I'd love to hear what he's taught you. And can you tell us all a little bit about him?
Yeah. So what Joe's mentioning is that I have a son. He's 19 at this point. He has been diagnosed with Asperger's, so he's on the spectrum. And obviously, if you have a child that is considered special needs, there's a lot there. And growing up as a dad who grew up with a pretty authoritative dad, in
Of course.
my own life, a Marine, very much spoke softly, carried a big stick kind of mentality, always driving for excellence, those kinds of things. Discipline's been a part of my life as a child, and then now as a father who's raising a family. Some of the difficulty things for us in dealing with DJ is really understanding where his diagnosis, if you will, the Asperger's, autism, versus non-compliance to rules and regs, were just rebellion. Yeah, he is a boy, so yes, there are those things, just like we all have aversion to rules and those kinds of things. And then where his Asperger's is part of that, and so it's not necessarily just a discipline issue, but mental, or however you want to, I don't have the best words to categorize that, but it was difficult trying to find that balance between wanting to discipline my son for an act of rebellion, if you will, versus trying to understand, is he really rebelling, or is that just him not understanding and walking down a path that's just the path that he has, and his path isn't the same as everybody else's. And so, I've really had to learn to listen and to pay attention to some of the maybe more subjective hints of his personality, to understand whether that's true rebellion or it's just DJ. He's a very black and white kid, doesn't understand subjectivity, the nature of body language or tonality or those kind of things.
Facial expression, right?
He's just black and white. It either is this way or that way.
Right.
So it's really helped me to be patient. Sometimes I'm not always the best person at that, but also in my relationships to other folks. The diagnosis for this stuff is getting more and more dialed in and accurate. And I think it used to be just thrown against the wall to see what sticks. I think I probably would be diagnosed today as a kid, just like my son was, with some of those same issues. But back then you were just seen as an overactive, crazy boy, right? Now there's the scientific stuff that they put all on top of it. But needless to say, it's really helped me to see other people in a different view and aspect, and trying to understand
that had to be eye-opening for you. From rules and regs to empathy. A big lesson in leadership. And by the way, I respect your answer. That was really open and insightful, and thank you very much for sharing that. From rules and regs to empathy is part of modern leadership. Leadership isn't authoritarianism. Leadership is defined by the willingness of others to follow. If they don't want to follow, you're not leading. You're just an authority. They have to be willing to follow. And how you help people bring their best, give them the space, not just a job, but the space to be creative and find the right process is critical. And if you correct someone the wrong way, course correct someone the wrong way, they can shut down. And then you don't get that anymore. And so authoritarian leaders sometimes lose the creativity that they're supposed to be nurturing. Excellence is an environment. You create the environment for excellence, according to the ancient Greeks. You don't create excellence in others. You just create the environment in which excellence can thrive. And that takes us understanding, as we enter each age of life as a novice, to understand our humility. We have to understand our power, and then we have to understand our humility in the process. And it's the gift of others. In your case, just now specifically, I'm sure you have a million stories, but specifically that one was your son. And understanding, maybe he's not rebelling. Maybe I need to see the world through his eyes so I can express my opinion to him. One of the greatest gifts I ever had was Dr. Bristol telling me to be fully and empathically in the moment with others. That's the most important thing I've ever learned. Don't phone it in. Don't get through the moment. Don't get the task checked off. That's a human being entering this age of life as a novice today, as they feel, going through whatever's going on in their head. Some of it they know about, some of it they don't know about. Someone's back here, repressed and invisible narratives they have not examined yet. But if you just fully and are empathically in the moment with a human being, You've got a chance to get from your right frontal cerebral cortex the idea that you want to communicate through this terrible, flawed process called communication, verbal communication, to their right frontal cerebral cortex, where maybe an idea can be exchanged and then they can understand themselves in the context of the idea. And we do that by speaking their language or understanding their perspective first. That level of leadership requires learning yourself first, which you've done. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I don't know that I could articulate it that well as far as knowing myself, but I think so. Just through life examination, through failure, probably more so through more of my failures than I have ever been successful.
That's interesting.
Understanding the aspects of who I am and that those failures teach. I mean, I learned a long time ago in this idea of communication in this Gestalt manner with a group of folks that I've been with for, I don't know, 10 or 12 years. There are a lot of times I learned more from failure than I ever did from their successes. And for me as well, the times that I failed have been more impactful and longer lasting than some of those successes have been. Because with a success, there's so many other people involved. It's not just me. It's never just me. And just about every endeavor I've ever had, there's always been other people that I've had to surround myself. It's one of those kind of, in politics, you don't have to be the smartest guy, or even in business. You just have to understand your strengths and weaknesses, and where there are weaknesses, you go build those strengths with other people. I'm not going to be a detailed, necessarily organized person. That's just not going to happen. However, I'll go hire that individual who can then build that in me and cover that area for me so that I look like I'm organized and detail oriented, right? Just with relationships with folks like yourself and other people that I've put in my life, being able to have those honest discussions without emotional attachment, just real conversations of saying, hey, you know what? I noticed this into you today. Did you really mean to do that? Or is that what you meant to say? Or, and so I'm getting some of that mirror reflection back. Sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not so good. And I would have preferred not to have that conversation. But in being willing to have those kind of relationships in my life, it has taught me a lot from that perspective. I can remember a situation where we did Johari window, which I'm sure most people are familiar with if they've ever been in teams, environments, or HR. But you have a box that you write down who you think you are. You have another box that you write down, and you write down what you think people know about you. And there's another box where you let other people in your environment write down what they think about you. And so then you look at all of that information and you get a chance to see that maybe the perception that you have of yourself, and maybe even what you think you're presenting to other people, is not always a truth. And that kind of exercise allowed me in a lot of ways to see areas that I needed to button up.
That's very honest. What a great forum to be able to have these kind of discussions and share with people. William James in 1898 said, when two people meet, there's actually six people meeting, each person as they actually are, each person as the other person sees them, and each person as they think they are.
Yeah.
And that's the American father of psychology. We have to learn that. There's a person and there's a persona. Difficult to make. And yet, when you're a leader, a parent, a partner, uh, when you realize that you're not alone in the world and you actually have an impact on other people by the way you live, speak, act, behave, dress, and so on, and the responsibility that's attached to that, then you have to be that person for them, not the way they want you to be, but you have to realize that your life impacts others. So being fully and empathically in the moment allows you to then understand there is an audience that you're evoking responses from just with your words, inspirational. If my wife asked me how I'm doing today, and I said, terrible, I'm depressed, that has an impact on her. If I said, great, I'm optimistic, that has an impact on her. Now, not necessarily correlational. In other words, if I say I'm optimistic and she's depressed, that can make her more depressed, right? But I don't know. So, but we have to understand how to have empathic relationships and still be the leader. And still, as you said, the people I choose it to be in my life, the people I select in my life. So you feel a sense of power about who you let in, who you let out. You could disregard people at any point that you choose to, excuse me. But sometimes you hear messages you don't want to hear. One of the things I realized as a very young man is we don't pride ourselves to our lessons. You mentioned failure being your greatest teacher. I don't pride myself to my lessons. I find that I learn when I humble myself to my lessons. I think that when we feel proud, we get into our proclivities and our patterns of proclivity, which is the way the mind works, patterns of proclivity. It's my theory of mind. And we want more and more and more of our own patterns, the more powerful or prideful we get. We get almost obsessive in an approach to whatever we're doing. But when we trip up, we go, oh, what just happened? Opportunity for humility, opportunity to learn. And I like and welcome those opportunities. And I think that's one of the things that the leaders have to keep in mind as we grow. Have your vision, lock into it. Don't compromise, not for a second, not for a human. But if there are lessons to learn along the way about how our proclivities keep us from learning, then you're limiting your progress, your ability to grow, your ability to find your capacity in life, which is what you love to do. And you've learned that. And I think you do it very, very well. I mean, you're now the leader of a large organization. You've bought, sold companies. I mean, your successes are undeniable. And you have people that your reputation for people who have known you. If someone says Don Owens, they're going to say something nice afterwards, and that's the goal, and that's a good achievement. I really appreciate this time together. Is there anything else you want to share with me or anybody?
Joe, I wanted to ask you a little bit. You use. I see it sometimes as a weakness of mine. I'm very much in the moment with people. When I'm meeting with them, I'm not trying to think down the path. I'm not trying to think past. I'm just in the moment. That's kind of how I live my life.
It is
Good
very
or bad.
much. I've experienced that with you.
But you talked about empathic, being part of, and can you explain a little bit what you mean by that when you use the term empathic?
To be empathic is to try to understand the way someone else might think, even though it's not the way you would organize an idea. You just have to say, well, why are they thinking this? How are they feeling this kind of emotion around an idea that, geez, would never feel this much emotion around? That's called affect.
Okay.
And this point is argued among the top psychoanalysts throughout time, Kohut and others. But the idea is, and I've seen you do it. When someone asks, that's why I asked someone, how's your mind today? It introduces an idea to themselves that they didn't consider. It's like, how do I feel? Well, I'm tired, I didn't sleep well, I didn't eat, I'm hungry, I'm angry, I'm this, I'm that, or I got this much stuff to do and I'm feeling like I'm behind. They're not considering how their mind is. Is this a good day to be creative? Is this a good day to not make too many big decisions because your inner conflict in fear, anger, or something else is bothering you? So I asked that question to help them think about themselves. So their answer to me then introduces how I can be empathic to them. I don't recommend this to everybody. I've had many people tell me it's a shit question, basically. But it works for me because I know how to decode their answer. Except my training, I know understand what they're going to say. So to be empathic is basically to give a crap, which you do naturally. You lead with that. You would never call a client and say, we have this product or service to sell. Shut up and listen to me. Let me tell you why it's good. So you can tell by your face, you can't do it. You're not capable of it. You first want to find out how they're doing. You want to make a connection. You want a personal connection. And then you want to ask them what their biggest problem is and how you can solve it. And that's how you sell. So this isn't a concept that's in front of your mind. This is how you were raised. You know this.
Absolutely. Again, that's why I don't think when I've in my early careers had a quote unquote sales job that was generated, where you're being measured strictly by numbers in those processes. I never enjoyed those kinds of things. I wanted that opportunity and space to learn and understand other people, not just throw a widget at them and get a yes or no and move on, handle objections and and try to coerce them into arm twisting and writing a check. I just never enjoyed those kind of sales jobs.
No, you don't live that way.
Yeah, not at all.
You don't believe that.
And I didn't build a business that way, and I wouldn't do that. That's just not who it is. Who I am or how I think the world works. But
if we can help others understand that they can build a career, a life, have a living, be well paid, feel like a doer doing who accomplished an intention, which is the key to sanity and being well in the mind. Joe Lichtenberg writes about this. If we can help create an environment where that excellence can survive and thrive, then we can be a serial entrepreneur, a good leader. And that's the job of a leader, to understand. I call that quintessential leadership.
Well, I think it's super important for me as a leader in an organization as we deal with large clients, enterprise level folks. So often companies that will grow will move away from sometimes that human glue. From a scalability perspective, sometimes
human glue. I like it.
We'll miss that piece, and then we end up having to worry about our front door going to get more and more sales, numbers driven, as opposed to closing the back door and keeping people. And so there's a balance, right? Where you're trying to grow a business, get scalable, move to that 100 million, the 500 million, the $1 billion organization. But yet in the same token, all these companies and all of our clients are all people, every one of them. And so if you negate that whole aspect of building relationships with them and doing some of the things you're talking about, it's just, you're creating a constant battle. Whereas if that relationship exists, it's much more sticky, if you will. And so if we try to build those relationships, that's exactly what, I want the folks underneath me as we train them up to be relationship builders.
Exactly, very important. And when we feel inner anger, conflict of any kind, we can take it out on others. Those are probably the only moments I'll regret if I have the chance to face a death. I don't know if I'll die suddenly or have a chance to face a death. I'm not sure which one would be better. But if I had a chance to face a death, I would think that the moments where I took out my anger or inner conflict on another human being would be the things I would regret the most. I shared this with a friend last week. As a leader, we have a greater responsibility, bigger than us, which is also one of the keys to mental well-being. What is bigger than you? And if there's something bigger than you, you're probably a good person. If there isn't, narcissism could be a part of this process. And so that inner glue that you talk about, that relationship, we know as salespeople, we know churn is more expensive because you lost a client you worked really hard to have and they went away. And now to get a new client takes a lot more energy. Keeping the clients you have and optimizing that relationship with them takes less energy. And ask them what they need and what else you can do for them. Sometimes is a great way to build a business.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us today for a conversation with Joe Caruso with his guest, Don Owens. If you'd like to tune in next month, our guest will be Sean Thomas. And thank you, Joe. Thank you, Don.
Thank you. Thank you, Don. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks, Joe.